Before we get started with today's video, I just want to give my sincerest condolences to all the victims and families involved in the senseless terrorist attack that took place here in New Orleans. If you're familiar with me, you'll know that New Orleans is my home, so I was particularly heartbroken to wake up New Year's Day, a day that's supposed to be a day of rebirth and renewal, and hear the gut-wrenching news of what had taken place the previous night. New Orleans itself is a city of resilience. We are a people of rich culture, harmony, tradition, and just all around good vibes. That's what makes this tragedy so hard to accept. And yet, me and my fellow New Orleanians will wake up each and every day, dust ourselves off, and keep going. Because nothing, not even a senseless attack curated by a radicalized human piece of garbage, will keep us from living for one another. I think I can speak for all of us here, not just in New Orleans, but the entire civilized world, that we look forward to all those responsible being brought to swift, unforgiving justice. May all the lives lost that night rest in peace. Now, let's get on with the video. It was just like any other day in Voronezh, a cultural hotspot in the Soviet Union. Workers were beginning their commute home, and kids were playing with one another in Voronezh Park. And then, in the blink of an eye, a red light appeared in the sky above them. People gathered round and looked at the mysterious orb as it grew larger, descending from the skies above down towards them. Everyone continued to watch in amusement, but little did they know that this orb was no mere spectacle, because what would happen on this day wouldn't just be another UFO sighting, but an alien encounter that would haunt these people for the rest of their lives. What's up guys, my name's Andrew and I run the ScareMail channel. If you've been keeping up with the news recently, you'll know there has been a lot of talk about orbs.
Don't say it!
Say what?
That word!
You mean orbs?
You just doomed this video!
Oh no, what do you mean?
YouTube is censoring any video related to the orbs or drones. It's why our last video was hidden from our own page despite being pinned.
Well, that's a little odd, but also a little narcissistic, don't you think?
What do you mean?
Well, we can't just blame the YouTube algorithm for our own shortcomings. The metrics were good, but maybe people just didn't vibe with the video, and that's okay. Besides, we're still a pretty small channel. Why would they care what we have to say? You're gonna blame the algorithm, aren't you?
You're damn right I am! This is censorship! It's a conspiracy! They're trying to limit our growth so they don't know the truth!
Okay, I'm done with this. Goodbye.
No!
Yeesh. Sorry about that. Anyway, all this talk is for good reason, because there have been more orb sightings in the past year than, well, probably ever. And in my last video I discussed two historical incidents where orbs were very prevalent. I'll link that video right here. But obviously, my search of these kinds of incidents didn't end there, because there's still ongoing speculation on what these orbs could even be. Are they ordinary UFOs, manifestations of consciousness, or something completely different? Well, I dug a little deeper until I came across an interesting story dating back to the Soviet Union in 1989. And it made me realize that these orbs are perhaps not as harmless as they look, because the orb seen in Voronezh that day was anything but. An audience gathered and watched on as the orb descended before them. 4 landing prongs emerged from the vessel, planting into the soil in front of the crowd. Then, a door opened as a 9-foot-tall being emerged from the vessel. It was described as being incredibly stocky, with no visible neck, dressed in a slick metallic suit, along with shoes that appeared to be made out of copper. Those in the crowd didn't move a muscle. They were petrified in fear, unsure of what they were even looking at. 2 more of the same beings then emerged from the ship, along with what appeared to be a 4-legged robotic companion. It followed them around as they surveyed the area, taking samples at their command. Suddenly, gasps and screams echoed among the crowd as a panic ensued. The beings appeared startled, almost realizing that, for the first time, they were the ones being observed. Then, in the blink of an eye, they vanished. Onlookers were dumbfounded. How could these beings just vanish into thin air? However, the encounter doesn't end there. The beings reappeared, almost as if they glitched back into reality. A 16-year-old boy was the first to notice, screaming at the sight of their otherworldly presence. Horrifically, at this very moment, one of the entities reached out a metal rod at the young boy, causing him to disappear, as if he was erased from existence. The crowd once again erupted into chaos until the beings quickly disappeared once again. And as the mysterious figures vanished, the boy suddenly reappeared. Witnesses hurried home, traumatized by the harrowing encounter. Calls rang in to local news agencies and authorities from all over town, so many that the incident could no longer be ignored. The very next day, the TASS, the USSR's major news agency at the time, reported on the horrifying encounter. And with 100 or so witnesses, the government decided to launch a formal investigation into the incident. However, their investigation turned up more questions than answers. Strangely enough, the only witnesses willing to comment on the sighting were children, which I find interesting considering there was a wide range of reported witnesses, including everyday adults, police officers, and even former military personnel. And yet, every single one of them refused to delve into the encounter for fear of persecution. Now, whether they were bullied into silence or not is unknown, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was the case. The children's testimonies were nearly identical, along with their description of the vessel, which was described as a large red orb with a pristine outer shell. It's important to note, however, that one child described the vessel as more of a red, oblong-like disc. Do with that information as you wish. That being said, a bunch of kids' testimonies weren't enough to go off of, so scientists at the University of Voronezh, along with other governmental institutions, investigated the area. And surprisingly, they found high levels of radiation near the landing site of the craft, along with a mysterious red mineral that had never been seen before on Earth. But despite this groundbreaking discovery, the scientists claimed that this wasn't exactly uncommon, claiming that radiation could be found in many unlikely areas throughout the Soviet Union due to the Chernobyl tragedy which had taken place just 3 years prior. And regarding the mysterious red mineral, it was allegedly confiscated and never seen again. But aside from this, the USSR didn't try to cover up the encounter like you'd expect. Instead, a private company was founded to give tours of the area, labeling Voronezh as the new Land of the Aliens. But I wouldn't read too much into that if I were you, because almost every place that has had a UFO encounter has tried to financially capitalize off of it. Just look at Roswell. And believe it or not, this wasn't the only encounter to occur in the region at the time. TASS reports indicate that there were dozens of orb and other UFO encounters throughout the 1980s in the Soviet Union. This is significant because just a couple years later in 1991, we would see the fall of the Soviet Union. And if we learned anything from my last video, these orbs seem to follow great conflict and only go away once the conflict itself is resolved. So, what does that mean for us? Are these orbs here to bring about an end or a new beginning? And are all these orbs filled with robotic-like aliens? Or are there many different kinds of orbs with different kinds of aliens? Hell, are they even UFOs? Because recent CIA filings and revelations indicate that we haven't even scratched the surface of what we're dealing with. Perhaps I'll save that for a different episode because trust me, it's a lot to process. However, there is one thing that I'm sure of. We should be very wary of these orbs in our sky, because if history tells us anything, it's that great change, albeit good or bad, seems to follow with their presence. And if you want to hear why that may be the case, check out my previous videos on the subject here. Thanks for watching, and good night.